Man, this hut is awesome, man. I have to say, like,
you know what I love that they were actually using it. I don't actually often come up here, but now I've got a great excuse to.
Oh shit, my belt. I am so. I feel so blessed that you have all this stuff. Like, I would never get to experience this stuff on my own. Like, I would never have a yurt.
But that's the beauty of doing things together.
Yeah.
Is that we can bring each other up, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Yeah, collaboration. That's actually one of the things that I ask life about, is that, I wanted to, that's another thing maybe, that I wanted to collaborate more, because there's so much synergy in collaboration. It just,
I definitely experienced that with us.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much more energy than doing it alone, especially if, like, I think both of us are pretty extroverted. I mean, you have your wife, you have your child, and you have your clinic, so you're probably running on fumes, even if you're an extrovert. But
funny, you experienced that extrovert in me.
Well, I think you're like I think you're an ambivert like me. I think you're
ambivert. I like that.
You're both introverted and extroverted.
Yeah.
But I think to some extent most people are. But I think at least I experience myself. I'm kind of half, and you seem like you're kind of the same.
I experience half.
Yeah.
But when people talk about the introverted, extroverted thing, or ambiverted thing,
right,
of where you get energy from or whatever, it's interesting. I actually listened to a podcast not too long ago, and they talked about this. That we all, when people talk about if you're an introvert or extrovert,
right,
there's also an ambivert, right?
Right.
But what they were talking about is that all of us, no matter what introvert, extrovert, whatever you are,
right,
we all, as human beings, get energy from being with other human beings.
Yeah, and I think we all require times alone.
Yeah,
if we've spent a lot of time with human beings.
But that's paramount to getting rest, right?
Right. And I think sometimes what is considered extroverts by the world are often people who are still kind of unconscious. Because when I see the caricature extrovert who's always hanging around people, who has a group of friends, who's, life of the party, lives in a communal living, whatever, I've never seen anyone, so far at least, who was very conscious who did that. It seems a little bit like a unconscious strategy of avoiding yourself, to be extroverted to that extent. And I think some introverts, I think it's kind of obvious that some people are introverted as a way to avoid the difficulties they have with the world and others, right?
So avoiding technique.
Exactly.
Yeah. And we all do that from time to time.
Of course, when we're low on resources, we do.
Yeah. Or when we're afraid.
Right.
And we're trying to avoid some kind of emotion or some kind of thing because we fear that, and our thoughts fuel that.
Right.
And we spend more and more time with ourselves because of that.
But I really think I think for most people, I think introversion and extroversion are just two healthy, dynamic poles that we move between. We recharge alone to some extent. We rest something, and then we go out and then we have some energy we want to spend with people, or maybe we get energy with people and spend it alone. I don't know, but I think introversion and extroversion are actually two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that people talk about it more these days, but I think everything which is regenerative is also dynamic. Which is to say that if something is self-sustaining and it restores its own energy, it must be a movement between two extremes, two polarities. So for example, a human being gains energy not just by resting, but also by doing things, right?
Yeah.
You do very passionate things that can give you energy, but at some point, even chasing your dream, you need a break from that, and then that gives you a kind of energy.
Well, I experienced that for sure.
So all these restorative systems, and I find it interesting when we talk about companies, because companies are talking about being regenerative these days. And one of the things about being regenerative is that you must have stages of rest and stages of activity, and that everything in life follows the cycles of birth, expansion, stagnation, death, and then birth again, or rebirth. So everything is always new and growing in some kind of, sorry, not new and growing, but something is just born, it's being born, or it's in a growth spurt, or it's starting to stagnate and not really moving, or it's starting to die or has died. And then when it has died, it is reborn into something new. And
with this growth and stagnation, right?
Right.
Can that be alternating at times before the death?
I would think so.
What's that?
I would think so. It's more of a metaphor, right?
Yeah.
Than a clear rule. But I think relationships go through it. I think relationships, good relationships, they will die periodically and be reborn into new relationships.
That's why in Germany there's a very normal relationship rule that after every 7 years, the couple sits down and seriously discusses whether they want to be in that relationship.
That's really enlightening.
Moving forward, it sounds like because of what you're talking about now, this cycle of birth, growth, stagnation, death, and if they are at that point, choosing to then, but maybe also what I'm hearing as well, that maybe that cycle can be a rebirth of a new part of the relationship, or a new kind of.
Exactly. That's the beautiful part, right? That some part of the relationship comes to an end and a new phase begins.
Yeah. I love that metaphor. It's great.
Yeah.
Thorbjørn, you keep mentioning the word consciousness, or if somebody is conscious,
right,
then they act in a certain way or whatever. But
we were talking about this earlier as well.
What's that?
We were talking about this earlier as well. I'm looking forward to the topic you're leading us into.
I don't know if where we're going with it yet, but either way, I'm curious to kind of talk about this subject of consciousness, I guess.
Right.
People throw it around in different ways. People have different ideas about what it means to them, and I'd like to get your perspective, I guess, on consciousness, or what when you say somebody is a conscious person, what does that mean? Where's. Yeah.
Right. When I look at someone, I see how conscious they are. But what does that actually mean if you pick it apart?
But just to step back for a second.
Right.
For you to see how conscious somebody is, you would need to be quite conscious yourself, right?
Well, I can only see people who are less conscious than me or more conscious than me to the degree that I can see, right? I couldn't see something that was way beyond me. So there's
okay.
It's like then again, you don't have to be a good tennis player to recognize a master, but you do need to know a few things. So
yeah,
I suppose you can see quite far, but yeah.
And so you could say a few things about this.
Right. I mean, my life has been dedicated to consciousness since I was 20, and I'm 36 now. So very early in my life, I made the dedication to live a conscious life and try to live that intention as purely as possible. And so it's quite simple. What determines a person's level of consciousness is how aware are they of, or how conscious are they of the things that most people are not conscious about. So in other words, how often do they see what kind of thoughts are going on in their mind? Because if they're not seeing them, then the thoughts are controlling them. And then the thoughts are making them see a world that reinforces what they're seeing in their thinking. So if a person has negative thoughts and they're not very conscious, then they perceive the world as negative and people as negative. They don't see that it's a negative thinking that they're experiencing. They think the world is negative.
So they have they actually experience their reality
in real time.
As through the lens of this negative self-talk or this negativity, or like you could say colored through the mask of their thoughts.
Exactly, because an unobserved thought becomes a interpretation of reality. So a conscious person is someone who is aware of their thoughts in real time as much as they are, aware of their emotions in real time as much as they are, and aware of their body and their actions in real time as much as they are. And the definition of how conscious they are is how conscious they are of these three aspects of life.
And of themselves.
Well, yeah,
Life themselves.
It really is, since we look through the lens of the body, the mind, and the emotions, how conscious we are of ourselves becomes how conscious we are of life, because otherwise life becomes distorted by mind, body, and emotions. So we can never be conscious of life before being conscious of ourselves. And being conscious of ourselves really means to be conscious of that which can be distracting ourselves. So that is how I think of consciousness. How do you experience that? Does that make sense to you? What's it like for you?
Yeah, it makes so much sense, and like for me, how I make sense of that, I guess, and for my own experience, is the this balance between my thoughts, my feelings, and my body, and these three parts that make up myself. And actually, what comes to me when I talk about this right now, in this moment, is like the experience of actually how I met my now wife.
Oh yeah.
We met in Spain, and we started. We both independently chose to walk this thing called the Camino, right? And it's like a 5-week-long pilgrimage walk through all kinds of different terrain in Spain. And I guess where I'm going with this is that along that journey, along that walk, I experienced very, very strongly at different parts of the walk, and especially after quite a number of weeks of walking, this part of my thoughts or my minds and my feeling in my body being in absolute harmony with one another.
Wow.
And being very much in balance, and not only within me, also within my wife that I was walking with.
Wow.
And that it just opened up so many. It opened up a really strong connection between her and I, because I felt we were coming from that harmony, or that place of.
Was she your
balance.
wife at the time?
No. She was. She was just somebody I really connected with, and we just happened to choose to walk 5 weeks together, which is a very intense way of meeting
So
meeting another person.
the way, am I correct in understanding this, that your life had sort of come to a halt? You weren't really getting where you wanted to go at some point, and then you went on this sort of life-changing walk in Spain, and you met your future wife there. It's kind of magical, isn't it?
It's kind of magical.
It's really romantic.
And happens in very unforeseen ways, right? Because I went to Spain because I was quite lost with myself,
Right.
and felt very distant to myself actually, and I was just overworked and stressed out and stuff. So I actually went to Spain for the to get away from everything,
Right.
and to sort my life out, you could say, or like come back with some kind of clear pathway or something.
Right. Which you did.
Which I did, but it turned my life around.
Yeah.
So in a very indirect way, it kind of, which I'm very grateful for, because otherwise I most likely wouldn't be here talking to you, Thorbjørn,
Yeah.
if I didn't do that walk, and not only do that walk, also choose to follow myself.
Right.
In that, which was one of the hardest choices I've made in my life, actually.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah.
I gotta be curious.
All right, so I'll be honest, right?
Right.
When I went and did the walk, I was in a relationship, and I walked with my now wife for 5 weeks, and nothing happened between us besides us walking. But what happened actually, now when I reflect on it, was the connection on a much, much deeper level.
Right. The intimacy.
Formed, yeah, like an intimacy without there being any kind of any other type of intimacy, right?
Yeah, of course.
And that was such a deep connection that when I went back to Australia to my girlfriend at the time,
Right.
I had to make that choice. Do I follow what's the easiest path?
Oh, okay, yeah, okay.
And the path of like, it makes sense to be in Australia, to be with that person.
Right.
I really cared about that person, everything like that. Or do I choose to follow myself, or follow my heart, or my intuition, or everything else in my body was basically screaming to like, just go to Denmark.
Right.
But my mind kept saying, that's stupid, like, it would never work out, like all the doubt, all the fear, everything else. And so
the little mind.
It was a completely challenging situation, because it was like one part of me was screaming not to do it, and the other part of me was like, this is deeply important to you, and the connection is so strong.
How did you find the strength in the end? Because I know you did it since you're sitting here.
Yeah. I kept reminding myself of that connection, or I kept coming back to that feeling in my body about her, and
that's beautiful, man.
Yeah, and I just did it. I just jumped on the flight, and at the time said goodbye. I split up with my girlfriend at the time, and then I just went to Denmark on a leap of faith, really, of not really knowing and not making any sense.
That's amazing. I love that.
And my whole life direction changed from that choice.
I love that. That's always the kind of life that I wanted to live. Just follow the call,
The spontaneity of
follow the call,
Follow the call,
wherever it takes you, just follow it, and things will work out. It won't be easy,
Definitely
but they'll be
easy.
meaningful.
Yeah. So for me, like, this body like body, thoughts, or minds feeling.
Oh yeah, that's what we were talking about. Yeah.
Balance, right? That's like I actually feel like that's such an important thing to keep coming back to.
Right.
Because when that is in sync, or when that is in harmony or balance or whatever you want to call it, we're able to kind of
we can live authentically.
Yeah, live authentically
from the inside and out.
And show ourselves authentically. Live that part of ourselves and be free. You know, be free to dwell in that space of I don't know even what words to put on, but maybe like aliveness, or just like kind of it's a beautiful place to live from, and it doesn't make any sense. So our mind will try and take us out of that.
Right.
And that's even more reason to keep coming back to that, and that's also what I do with my clients, actually, with giving them the space to reconnect with that part of themselves on the different levels, and free up themselves to live authentically, or just open up to that part of themselves that is always there. It's always there. It's just a matter of bringing that to the surface, and at times it can just be buried, and at times we can have so many masks and so many different layers that we've put on to hide that part of ourselves, or to protect ourselves, or to you name it. And especially for some reason in Denmark, there's so much, and I'm not sure, I'm still trying to work it out because I'm pretty new to Denmark, right? But what I've at least experienced from people who come to me, and my own experience, is this kind of this normality in society,
right?
That to be in a certain way, or to behave in a certain way.
Cult of normality.
Yeah, and it's almost like it's so present that when I go to act authentically, or to be myself, there's I'm not sure if it's just myself holding it back, or the general kind of way people act.
Right.
And for me, it's very much coming from our what makes sense to our mind, the logical part of ourselves.
Right.
But there's this whole other part of us that doesn't get to be expressed or opened up to, and this is very general, right? But at least this is what I experienced from, internationals, and also Danes. Are like, there's all this part of themselves that wants to express and wants to get out there. This authentic part of them. Yeah. It doesn't get to have a voice, or get to be shared with the world, or with colleagues, or with the relationship, or whatever it is. And so it gets buried and buried and buried, and to a point where it comes out in other ways of depression, or anxiety, right, or just feeling not yourself, or feeling pain, or whatever. And it's just like to come back to that, to come back to this expression, and to come back to that balancing of who you are on a deeper level. To bring that out is what I help people do, and is what I also experience in myself to be absolutely vital to just to enjoying what we have here and now, and to living, and to being, and to expressing ourselves. And now I'm just getting very carried away. So what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, and it's not just vital in a metaphorical sense, because like I told you, I have an illness which is it can be very limiting to me. But one of the things I see is that whenever I'm doing what I love, expressing myself freely, suddenly I have energy. Yeah. And my illness it's a very real illness. It's not.
It's not something your mind is making.
There are very physical limitations to that illness, but suddenly when I'm doing what I love, I have no problem. For the listeners that don't know, I have a very low kidney function left. And I can be tired all day, but then when one of my clients call, I'm up, I'm walking around my apartment for 1.5 hours. I'm laughing, I'm happy, I'm enjoying it. How does that work? It shouldn't, it makes no sense. But that's because I love what I'm doing. I'm expressing my true self. And there's energy in that, even if you're, seriously sick. So it's such a phenomenal thing that it even transcends illness. That's how powerful this is. And that's not to say anything of how all the people who aren't ill, it's an even, to be seriously ill is nothing compared to not having joy and magic in your life. That's much worse. That is a real illness. And you put it so well, because what I do the exact same thing with my client. I call it to lead them back to the magic in their lives. Because I think everyone's life should be an adventure. It should be magical. And I've always known that deep in my heart, but I was too scared to live that way. It took me many years to gather the courage, and eventually I did it. But we all have
Congratulations on doing.
Thank you. I wanted to do it for so long. I knew it was right for me, but this, we learn in Denmark, this kind of pettiness, this kind of cunning kind of intelligence, this small intelligence. It's like a rat-like intelligence. It's so cunning and fear-based. And it keeps us in this prison where there's no magic, no joy, no life. And everyone around us confirms us that we're doing the right thing, we're playing it safe, we're looking at, we're being secure, we have our security nets and all this stuff. But we're not really living. What's the point of being so secure if you aren't living? And here's an interesting thing. We are reminded over and over again through random occurrences, random bankruptcies, sudden illnesses, that even if you play it safe, no one is ever safe. There are people who play it safe their whole lives and catastrophe hits anyway. But what did you do it for? There is no security in this life. There might be more if you live a certain place in a certain way. But at the absolute best, all you're doing is just protecting yourself from a life worth living. How does that make sense?
So you're saying you can live your whole life in this state of protection or fear or acting in the safe way,
right?
And be at the end of your life and realize that you haven't really lived, or you haven't.
I'm saying you can
enjoyed.
You could be 40 years old and you've done everything right to play your life safe every day, and suddenly someone tells you have cancer and you have 1 year left to live.
Yeah.
And you did everything right. And you ate healthy, and you kept low, you didn't stick out, you did everything right, and now you're gonna die. So it can happen to anyone, and it does happen to anyone. And what I would like to say, a lot of these diseases, I believe, come from psychological illness, or in other ways. I don't mean classically, I don't mean diagnoses, I mean the psychological illness of being unhappy for too long. I think a lot of illnesses come from that. Because the body is not good at staying healthy if it's depressed all the time. And to not manifest your true being and to grow into what you're supposed to be, that will become a depression sooner or later. As you mentioned earlier, there's a voice inside you that if you don't listen to it, it becomes more and more painful. But I would say the wonderful thing is that I've discovered, and that everyone discovers, is that no matter how you live your life, no matter how much you fuck it up, no matter how much you betray yourself and absolutely humiliate yourself, live without self-esteem, sacrifice yourself for the wrong things, your true being cannot be destroyed. Your authentic being is never destroyed, never tarnished, not broken in any way. You can spend 40 or 50 years living in a way that's betraying yourself, and when you're 41 you can regain your true self.
Because it's always there.
It cannot be destroyed. For some beautiful, amazing reason, this true self cannot be destroyed. So no matter whatever your sins were, whatever you failed and however low you fell, you can always start over, and it will be right there, right where you left it. But I think that's the deep kindness of the universe.
So whether you're starting on this path of consciousness at age 20 or age 40 or 80, you'll always be able to come into this authenticity or this consciousness state of living, or of choosing to abide in that place.
I think it was Rumi, the Persian poet, who said, even if you have broken your vow 1,000 times, come, come yet again, come. Our caravan is not a caravan of despair. And that, to me, beautifully expresses that it doesn't matter how many times you failed, because you can always start over, you can always join this caravan of joy, you can always regain the right life for you. Because wonder of wonder, what is real cannot be destroyed. And thank God for that, because I think we've all done things where you'd wonder if there was anything real left in us after that.
Yeah.
Betray ourselves so deeply, so shamefully.
Hurt ourselves so much.
Living, in ways that are just our lowest self. But it's always there waiting. And I think, I'm so grateful for that. I truly am.
So am I. So what we want to say to you, whoever's listening here, is that this path or this choice to be conscious is always available to you at any point in time.
Right.
It's always there, no matter how low you feel or how high you feel in your life, how much you've experienced despair or pain or emotional hurt and things like this. You can always come into this part of consciousness or this part of yourself that's, like you said, Thorbjørn, no matter what happens in your life, it can never be, what did you say?
It can never be destroyed.
Never be destroyed. It's always there.
It can't even be tarnished, not even a little bit. It's like the blue sky. And I think it was Jesus that said, I don't remember completely, but I think he said that God loves the sinners more than the saints. And no matter how much you've sinned or how deeply you've sinned, God will just love you even more. That you can always come home.
Yeah.
Well, I think that concludes Conversations in the Yurt, the 3rd episode. We are now listening to this wonderful rain.
We hope you guys enjoyed listening to this as well. I mean, I know we finished on the note of Jesus quote, but it's like consciousness takes many different forms and a way of experiencing this, you can do yourself. And also, coming and experiencing one of the sessions with either Thorbjørn or myself. In real time, in real life. Perhaps that's also another way of getting a taste for what it feels like in your body to have that direct experience of feeling, maybe not even feeling, but just experiencing yourself in a way that you may have not done in a very long time, and bringing more of that expressive, authentic part of yourself out, that part that feels alive, that part that feels joy and feels happiness and feels completely real and here, and it has so much to live for. So we can, we have that. And you also have that as well, so it's...
And another wonderful thing is that once you learn it, you can give it to others. And it was Buddha that said that one flame can kindle 1,000 candles without becoming any less. What's so wonderful about consciousness is that once you have it, you give it to others without losing anything. And you can light so many candles in your life if you'll just be willing to light your own. And we'll love to help you with this process. And I think I speak for both me and Jonathan when I say that there's no more beautiful process in this life than to starting the path of consciousness. And I think we'll end it there for the night.
Yeah.
We probably should get some sleep soon. So to our listeners, have a good night, and we hope it was a little bit enlightening.
Was that only 37 minutes?
Damn, that's not much.